Hands trembling with rage, Marcus refused to serve the CEO whose company had cruelly terminated his dying daughter's life-saving medication. Instead of demanding his job, she demanded the truth, igniting an explosive investigation that would expose corporate corruption and save his child's future. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Marcus Cole's hands trembled as he pressed them together in refusal, the crisp white sleeves of his uniform catching the soft glow of the restaurant's chandeliers. "I'm sorry, but I can't serve this table." His manager, Paolo, shot him a look of stunned disbelief from across La Terrace, the upscale French restaurant where Marcus had worked for the past 3 years. The elegant dining room fell into an awkward hush, the ambient chatter dimming as heads turned toward the confrontation unfolding by table 12. Across from Marcus stood Victoria Hawthorne, CEO of Hawthorne Innovations and one of the city's most influential power players. Her dark eyes narrowed, her immaculately tailored black suit contrasting sharply with the restaurant's cream and gold interior. She extended a sheet of paper toward him, the evening's specialty menu, her manicured fingers gripping it tightly enough to create subtle creases along its edge. "I don't understand," she said, her voice carefully controlled yet brittle with tension. "Is there a problem?" Behind her, 2 associates sat at the pristine white-clothed table, their faces frozen in expressions of uncomfortable surprise. Water glasses remained untouched, champagne flutes empty, the scene suspended in a moment of unexpected conflict. Marcus swallowed hard but kept his hands firmly pressed together, palms facing outward in a gesture both defensive and resolute. The 38-year-old waiter had never caused a scene in his life. He was known for his reliability, his attention to detail, his ability to navigate the complex social dynamics of high-end dining with graceful invisibility. But tonight, invisibility was impossible. "I can't serve this table," he repeated, his voice steadier this time. "I'll ask Paolo to assign another waiter immediately." Victoria's posture stiffened. "That doesn't answer my question." "Why?" 3 years ago, Marcus might have backed down. 3 years ago, he might have swallowed his pride and carried on with his job. 3 years ago, his world hadn't shattered into jagged, unrecognizable pieces. But now, looking at Victoria Hawthorne with her confident stance and cold efficiency, he couldn't bring himself to serve her, not after what her company had done to his family. Paolo materialized at his side, his smile professionally apologetic. "Ms. Hawthorne, please accept my deepest apologies for this confusion. I'll personally handle your table this evening." But Victoria didn't look at Paolo. Her gaze remained fixed on Marcus, evaluating, calculating, as if he were a problematic line item in a quarterly report. "I want to know why this waiter is refusing to serve me." Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant. This job was everything, the only thing keeping a roof over his daughter Lily's head, the only way he could afford her specialized tutors and therapy. He was one incident away from termination after requesting too many schedule accommodations for Lily's appointments. He thought of his 6-year-old daughter waiting at Mars Patel's apartment next door, probably still awake despite the late hour, probably clutching her worn stuffed elephant and asking when Daddy would be home. His throat tightened. "Miss Hawthorne," he said quietly, "I believe it would be better for both of us if another waiter handled your table." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, a flash of recognition that vanished so quickly Marcus thought he might have imagined it. "Paolo," she said, finally turning to the manager, "I'd like to speak with this employee privately." Paolo hesitated, clearly torn between appeasing a valuable customer and following proper protocol. "Miss Hawthorne, I assure you I'll address this matter with appropriate—" "5 minutes," she interrupted. "In your office. Then we can all proceed with our evening." The manager's forced smile twitched at the corners. "Of course. This way, please." Marcus followed them through the kitchen's swinging doors, past the line of curious chefs and dishwashers, into the small glass-walled office tucked behind the wine storage. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the end of his employment at La Terrace, possibly the end of his ability to keep his fragile life from collapsing entirely. Paolo gestured them inside, then hesitated at the threshold. "Would you like me to stay, Ms. Hawthorne?" "That won't be necessary." Her tone made it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. When the door closed behind Paolo, Victoria turned to face Marcus. Up close, in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the office, she looked different from her glossy magazine photos. Faint lines framed her eyes, and a subtle shadow of exhaustion lingered beneath her professional composure. "You know who I am," she stated. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "Yes. And clearly you have some issue with me or my company that's preventing you from doing your job." She placed her leather portfolio on Paolo's cluttered desk. "So let's address it." The directness caught him off guard. He'd expected threats, demands to see the manager, perhaps even immediate calls for his termination. Not this businesslike approach to conflict resolution. "My daughter," Marcus began, the words catching in his throat. "Lily. She was in the clinical trial for Neuroclear." Understanding dawned on Victoria's face. "The pediatric neurological drug." "Yes." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "She has juvenile onset Huntington's disease. She was doing well in the trial, better than she had in years." The tremors decreased, Her cognitive testing improved. For the first time since her diagnosis, I thought we might have ... hope. Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral, but something in her posture shifted, a nearly imperceptible tensing of her shoulders. Then Hawthorne Innovations terminated the trial. Marcus continued. No warning, no explanation, just a form letter saying the program had been discontinued due to strategic portfolio realignment. The corporate jargon still burned in his memory. Do you know what it's like to watch your child improve, to start believing in a future, and then have it ripped away overnight? Victoria didn't answer immediately. She walked to the small window overlooking the kitchen, where chefs in white coats moved in practiced choreography, unaware of the conversation unfolding behind the glass. The NeuroClear trial, she finally said. That decision was made before I became CEO. Your name was on the letter, Marcus countered. It was. She turned back to face him. I signed off on many decisions during the transition period, based on recommendations from the outgoing executive team and the board. A pause. That doesn't make it right. The response wasn't what Marcus had expected. He'd rehearsed this confrontation countless times in his mind over the past year, imagining her cold dismissals, her corporate defenses, her indifference to the human cost of business decisions. He hadn't prepared for anything resembling acknowledgement. Right or wrong doesn't matter much to Lily, he said. All she knows is that the medicine that was helping her stopped coming. All she understands is that she's getting worse again. Victoria studied him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. You're raising her alone? The question felt invasive, yet Marcus found himself answering. Her mother left after the diagnosis. Couldn't handle it. It's been just us for 4 years now. And you work here full-time, 6 nights a week, sometimes doubles on weekends. Who watches your daughter? My neighbor, Mrs. Patel. She's a retired nurse. Marcus frowned, increasingly confused by the direction of the conversation. Look, I understand I've put my job at risk tonight. I shouldn't have refused to serve your table. It was unprofessional, and I apologize. Victoria retrieved her portfolio from the desk. I'm not interested in your apology, Mr. Cole. Marcus Cole. Mr. Cole. She extracted a business card and held it out to him. I want you to come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Marcus stared at the card without taking it. Why? Because I need to understand exactly what happened with that clinical trial. Her voice took on an edge of steel. And you and your daughter appear to be primary sources. I have to work tomorrow. And Lily has therapy in the afternoon. I'll speak with your manager about the schedule, and we can arrange transportation for your daughter's appointment. She extended the card further. This isn't optional, Miss Cole. Reluctantly, he accepted the embossed card, the heavy stock paper smooth between his fingers. I don't understand, he admitted. Why do you care about this now? Victoria's expression revealed nothing. Let's just say I've been reviewing certain decisions made during the company's transition, and your daughter's trial is now of particular interest to me. Before Marcus could respond, she opened the office door. Paolo hovered anxiously just outside, pretending to organize wine invoices. Mr. Cole will need tomorrow morning off, Victoria announced. I've scheduled a meeting with him at Hawthorne Innovations. Any objections? Paolo's eyebrows shot upward. No, of course not. We can adjust the schedule. Excellent. She turned back to Marcus. 10 a meter. Sharp. Bring any documentation you have regarding your daughter's participation in the trial. With that, Victoria Hawthorne swept back through the kitchen toward her waiting table, leaving Marcus standing in bewildered silence, clutching her business card and wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or somehow stumbled into a chance to help his daughter. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He served his remaining tables mechanically, his mind replaying the strange encounter. When he finally clocked out at midnight, his phone showed 3 missed calls from Mrs. Patel. His stomach dropped as he quickly dialed her back. Marcus, she answered immediately, her voice tight with concern. Lily's had a difficult evening. The tremors are worse. I think you should take her to the doctor tomorrow. He closed his eyes briefly, leaning against the alley wall outside the restaurant's service entrance. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Is she awake? Finally asleep. It took the emergency medication. I'll be right there. And Mrs. Patel? Something's come up tomorrow morning. A meeting that might ... single quotes. He hesitated, not wanting to spark false hope. That might be important for Lily. As Marcus pocketed his phone and began the familiar walk home through darkened streets, the business card seemed to burn in his pocket. The VO, Hawthorne CEO, Hawthorne Innovation. The woman whose signature had ended his daughter's chance at improvement was now demanding to see him. For Lily's sake, he would go. But as the night wind cut through his thin jacket, Marcus wondered what price this unexpected interest would ultimately demand, and whether it was one he could afford to pay. The Hawthorne Innovations headquarters loomed over the financial district like a glass monolith, its 73 stories reflecting the morning sunlight in blinding flashes. Marcus stood at its base, Lily's medical binder clutched tightly under one arm, feeling impossibly small. Daddy, is this where they make the medicine? Lily asked, her small hand warm in his. Marcus looked down at his daughter, her dark curls neatly brushed for this mysterious appointment. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one she insisted, brought good luck and dinosaur-patterned leg braces that supported her increasingly unreliable limbs. The contrast between her bright, hopeful face and the sterile corporate tower made his throat tight. This is where they make decisions about the medicine, he answered carefully. Remember what I told you? We're meeting someone important who might be able to help us. Lily nodded solemnly. At 6, she had already developed an old soul's understanding of her condition, a wisdom no child should have to carry. Is she nice? Marcus hesitated. I'm not sure yet. The truth was he had barely slept, replaying every possible scenario for this meeting. Was it a trap? A publicity stunt? Some corporate damage control exercise? Or could Victoria Hawthorne genuinely want to understand what had happened with the NeuroClear trial? The sleek glass doors slid open automatically as they approached. The lobby was a cathedral to corporate success, soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a massive sculpture of what appeared to be DNA strands rendered in brushed steel and blue glass. Security guards with earpieces stood at strategic points, their gazes tracking visitors with practiced indifference. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a young man in an impeccable suit checked his ID before calling upstairs. Within moments, a private elevator arrived with a soft chime. Ms. Hawthorne's office is on the 70th floor, the receptionist explained. The elevator will take you directly there. As the doors closed and the elevator began its smooth ascent, Lily pressed her face against the glass wall, watching the city shrink beneath them. "We're flying, Daddy." Marcus forced a smile, trying to quell his anxiety. What had made him think this was a good idea? He'd taken the morning off work, rescheduled Lily's physical therapy, all on the imperious command of a woman whose company had abandoned his daughter's treatment without explanation. The elevator slowed to a stop, opening directly into a minimalist reception area. The walls were adorned with sleek digital displays showing Hawthorne Innovation's latest pharmaceutical breakthroughs and medical technologies. A striking woman with a platinum bob rose from behind a curved desk. "Mr. Cole?" "I'm Diane, Ms. Hawthorne's executive assistant. She's expecting you." Her professional smile softened when she saw Lily. "And you must be Lily. What a beautiful dress." Lily beamed, momentarily distracted from the tremor that had started in her right hand, a sign she was either excited or nervous. Perhaps both. "Ms. Hawthorne is just finishing a call. Can I get you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee?" "Water for both of us would be great," Marcus replied, guiding Lily to one of the low-slung leather chairs. He helped her sit, noticing how the tremor had spread to her arm. He unzipped his backpack and retrieved her medication in a small juice box. "Here you go, Lil. Medicine time." She took the pills without complaint, a routine so familiar it required no explanation. Diane returned with 2 water bottles, her eyes lingering briefly on the medication but offering no comment. 5 minutes later, the frosted glass doors to Victoria's inner office slid open. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming." Victoria stood in the doorway, as immaculately put together as the night before, though she'd traded the black suit for a navy one. Her gaze immediately went to Lily. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps, though her posture remained rigidly professional. "Please, come in." The office beyond was surprisingly understated for someone of her position. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. A sleek desk occupied one corner rather than dominating the center of the room. The space was arranged more like a living room, with comfortable seating around a low table where documents and tablets were already arranged. "Hello," Lily said, her voice carrying the slight slur that appeared when she was tired or nervous. "I'm Lily Cole. I'm 6 3/4. Victoria regarded her with an unexpected gentleness. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily Cole, who is 6 3/4. "I'm Victoria. You have a pretty office," Lily declared, looking around with undisguised curiosity. "Is that your castle?" She pointed to a framed photograph on the wall, an aerial view of what appeared to be a research campus. "That's our research center in Switzerland," Victoria explained. "Not quite a castle, but the mountains around it do look like something from a fairy tale." She gestured toward the seating area. "Please sit down. I've arranged for Lily to meet with Dr. Chun while we talk. He has a playroom connected to his office where children can be comfortable during consultations." Marcus tensed. "That wasn't our arrangement. Lily stays with me." Victoria met his gaze steadily. "Dr. Chun is our chief pediatric neurologist. Given what we're discussing today, I thought it might be beneficial for him to meet Lily. But of course, that's entirely your decision." Before Marcus could respond, Diane appeared at the door with a kind-faced man in his 50s wearing a lab coat over casual clothes. "Dr. Chun is here." The doctor smiled warmly. "You must be Lily and Mr. Cole. I've heard good things about both of you." Lily, with a child's instinctive ability to sense genuineness, smiled back. "Do you really have a playroom?" "I do, with a doll house that has an elevator just like the one you rode up in." Lily looked up at Marcus with pleading eyes. "Can I go see Daddy, please?" Marcus hesitated, every protective instinct on high alert. "I don't think Daddy," Lily interrupted with the exasperation only a 6-year-old could master. "I'll be okay. You can have your grown-up talk and I'll play. Dr. Chun looks nice." Dr. Chun smiled reassuringly. "My office is just down the hall, Mr. Cole. You're welcome to come check on her anytime, and I promise we won't do any examinations without you present. This is just to give her a comfortable space while you and Ms. Hawthorne talk." After a moment's consideration, Marcus nodded. "All right, but I'll walk you there, Lily." 5 minutes later, after seeing the admittedly impressive playroom and giving Dr. Chun a condensed version of Lily's medical history, Marcus returned to Victoria's office. She stood by the window gazing out at the city, her reflection in the glass revealing a pensive expression that disappeared the moment she turned to face him. "Your daughter is remarkable," she said. "She is." Marcus remained standing, suddenly aware of his worn shoes against the plush carpet, the faint food stains on his jacket cuffs that never quite came out no matter how carefully he laundered it. "But you didn't bring us here to evaluate my daughter's personality." Victoria gestured to the chair across from hers. "Please sit, Mr. Cole. And you're right. I brought you here because I need to understand exactly what happened with the NeuroClear trial. From a patient's perspective, Marcus sat, placing Lily's medical binder on the table between. Why? Trial ended over a year ago. Your company made its decision. A decision I'm increasingly concerned was made for the wrong reasons. She leaned forward, her polished corporate veneer slipping to reveal something harder, more determined. When I took over as CEO 6 months ago, I inherited several problematic situations. One of those was the termination of multiple late-stage clinical trials, including NeuroClear. Problematic for whom? Marcus asked. For the company's bottom line, or for the children who were finally showing improvement? Victoria didn't flinch from his anger. Both. Potentially. That's what I'm trying to determine. She tapped a tablet on the table. The official reason given for terminating the trial was insufficient efficacy in comparison to projected outcomes. That's a lie, Marcus said flat. Lily improved dramatically during the trial. Her tremors decreased by almost 60%. Her cognitive testing showed significant gains. The doctors running the trial were excited about her progress. I believe you, Victoria said simply, which is why I need to see her complete records. I need to understand what actually happened because the data that crossed my desk doesn't match what you're describing. Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile the corporate shark he'd imagined with the intensely focused woman before him. You're saying someone falsified the trial results? I'm saying there are discrepancies that need to be explained. She opened the folder in front of her. 3 months before the NeuroClear trial was terminated, Hawthorne Innovations entered into preliminary acquisition talks with Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Meridian had a competing neurological drug in development, Neurogenex. Understanding dawned on Marcus. They wanted you to kill NeuroClear to clear the path for their own drug. Victoria nodded grimly. That's my working theory, but I need evidence. The previous CEO and several board members had significant financial interest in seeing the Meridian acquisition go through. If they deliberately tanked a promising trial to boost Meridian's value, she didn't finish the sentence. But she didn't need to. The implications were clear. So my daughter was just collateral damage in a corporate takeover game. The bitterness in Marcus's voice could have etched glass. If I'm right, yes. Victoria's jaw tightened, and I won't allow that to stand. For the first time since entering the imposing tower, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. What exactly do you want from me? Everything you have. Trial documentation, medical records, observations you made during the treatment period. I need to build a case that can't be dismissed or buried. Marcus tapped the binder between them. I kept everything. Every form, every test result, every note from every doctor's appointment. I documented all of Lily's changes, the improvements and the backslides after the medicine stopped. Victoria's eyes gleamed with something that looked almost like respect. Then let's begin. Single quotes for the next 2 hours. Marcus and Victoria pored over the documentation. The sleek conference table became a landscape of medical reports, clinical trial protocols, and Lily's handwritten journals where she had drawn pictures of her. Good days and bad days during the trial, sunshine and storms in a child's unsteady hand. Victoria worked with methodical precision, scanning documents into her secure system, making notes, occasionally asking Marcus to clarify details. She didn't work like any executive Marcus had encountered in his limited experience of delegation. No performative authority, just focused determination as she assembled the pieces of a puzzle someone had deliberately scattered. This report, she said, holding up a form dated 3 months before the trial's cancellation, indicates Lily showed a 63% reduction in chorea movements and a 47% improvement in fine motor control after 12 weeks on NeuroClear. Yes, Marcus confirmed. That was when we started to really believe it was working. She could hold a crayon without the special grip for the first time in almost a year. She started drawing again. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she compared it with another document. Yet in the final trial summary submitted to the board, Lily's case shows only a 12% improvement in motor symptoms, classified as statistically insignificant and potentially attributable to placebo effect. She placed both documents side by side. Even to Marcus's untrained eye, the discrepancy was glaring. Someone altered her results, he said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. They deliberately made it look like the drug wasn't working. Victoria nodded grimly. And not just Lily's. I'm finding similar patterns with other trial participants. She tapped a sleek console on her desk. Diane, please ask Dayar Chun to bring Lily back when they're ready. Turning back to Marcus, she continued, the question is who had the authority to make these changes? Clinical trials have rigorous protocols and oversight, Dr. Winters was Lily's primary researcher, Marcus offered. He always seemed genuinely excited about her progress. I can't imagine him falsifying data. Victoria made a note. Dr. Edward Winters? He resigned from Hawthorne shortly after the trial ended. He told us he was taking a position at a research hospital in Boston. Marcus frowned. At least that's what his assistant said when I called trying to understand what happened with the trial. I'll look into his current whereabouts. Victoria's fingers flew over her tablet. What about the trial administrator, who oversaw the entire program? We dealt mostly with the clinical staff, but I remember signing forms that had the name Reynolds on them. Dr. James Reynolds. Victoria's expression hardened. James Reynolds was the previous CEO's brother-in-law. He left the company with a substantial severance package 2 weeks after I took over. The door opened, and Dr. Chun entered with Lily, whose face was flushed with excitement. Daddy? Dr. Chun has a microscope that connects to a computer. I looked at my own cells. She rushed toward Marcus, her gait uneven but her eyes bright. They were dancing all around. Marcus gathered her into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. That sounds amazing, little doctor. Chun followed with a tablet in hand, his expression professionally neutral but with a hint of underlying tension. Miss Hawthorne, could I speak with you for a moment? Victoria nodded. Cole, there's a break room down the hall with snacks and drinks if Lily needs something. Diane can show you, Doctor. Chun and I need to consult briefly. Marcus recognized a dismissal when he heard one, but he also recognized the urgency in Dr. Chun's demeanor. Come on, Lil. Let's find you a snack. Diane appeared with perfect timing, escorting them to a well-appointed break room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a refrigerator stocked with an assortment of healthy options. Lily immediately gravitated toward the fruit display, selecting a banana with careful deliberation. Can I get you anything else? Diane asked. We're fine, thank you, Marcus replied, helping Lily peel her banana. Her tremors had intensified, excitement always made them worse, and the simple task of peeling fruit had become a challenge in recent months. As Diane left, Marcus couldn't help wondering what Dr. Chun was telling Victoria. Had he observed something concerning in Lily during their time together? Had he confirmed the trial's potential? The uncertainty gnawed at him. Lily, oblivious to his anxiety, happily munched her banana while watching the tiny elevator cars move up and down the adjacent building. Daddy, is the medicine lady going to make my shaking stop again? Marcus's heart clenched. How to answer that without offering false hope? I don't know yet, sweet pea. She's trying to understand what happened with your medicine. I liked that medicine, Lily said simply. It made the storms in my arms go away. That was how she described the tremor storms in her arms and legs, earthquakes in her hands. A 6-year-old's vocabulary for a disease that would progressively rob her of control over her own body. Before Marcus could respond, the break room door opened. Victoria entered alone, her expression carefully composed. Mr. Cole, would it be possible for Lily to spend a little more time with Dr. Chun? There are some additional observations he'd like to make with your permission. Marcus stood, instinctively placing himself between Victoria and his daughter. What kind of observations? Nothing invasive, Victoria assured him. Dr. Chun would like to record Lily's current tremor patterns for comparison with her trial documentation. Purely observational, no procedures, no medication. Marcus hesitated, looking down at Lily, who was now struggling to open a small container of apple juice. Lily, would you be okay spending more time with Dr. Chun? Can I use the microscope again? She asked hopefully. Victoria nodded. I'm sure that can be arranged. Then yes, Lily declared with the easy confidence of childhood. When Dr. Chun arrived to escort Lily back to his office, Marcus knelt to give her a quick hug. I'll be right here talking with Miss Hawthorne. Be good for Dr. Chun, okay? I'm always good, Lily replied with such seriousness that both adults couldn't help but smile. As the door closed behind them, the smile faded from Victoria's face. Mr. Cole, please sit down. Something in her tone made Marcus's stomach twist. What did Dr. Chun tell you? Victoria took a seat across from him, her posture rigid. Dr. Chun reviewed Lily's current symptoms against the trial documentation. Based on his preliminary observation, he believes Lily should have qualified for the expanded access program after the trial. Expanded access? Marcus repeated. What's that? When promising drugs are still in development but show significant benefits for certain patients, the FDA allows what's called expanded access or compassionate use. It permits patients who demonstrated clear improvement to continue receiving the medication while it's still being evaluated. Marcus struggled to process this information. You're saying Lily should have continued getting NeuroClear even after the trial ended? Yes. According to Dr. Chun, Lily's improvement metrics easily exceeded the threshold for the expanded access program. She should have been transitioned directly from the trial to expanded access. Instead, she was simply cut off. The revelation hit Marcus like a blow to the chest. Not only had the trial data been falsified, but his daughter had been denied continued access to a medication that was helping her medication she had a right to receive. Why? He managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would anyone do that? Victoria's expression hardened. Money. Power. The Meridian acquisition was worth billions. The previous leadership stood to gain enormous personal wealth from stock options and golden parachutes. Successful competing drug like NeuroClear would have threatened the valuation. She leaned forward. Cole, what I'm about to propose is unusual, but these are unusual circumstances. I'd like to restart Lily's treatment immediately under a properly documented expanded access program. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. You can do that? Just restart it? I'm the CEO. I can expedite the application. We still have the medication in our research pharmacy. The previous administration never destroyed the existing supply, probably to avoid question. With Dr. Chun's recommendation and the documentation we've assembled today, I believe we can have FDA approval in the meantime, single quote. She hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully. In the meantime, Dr. Chun has suggested we could begin with the lowest therapeutic dose as part of a new evaluation process. It would be fully documented and above board, just accelerated. Marcus understood what she was offering, an immediate resumption of Lily's treatment, bending procedural rules without breaking them, using her executive authority to cut through red tape that might otherwise take months to navigate. Why are you doing this? He asked. still suspicious despite the surge of hope her words had triggered. Yesterday I refused to serve you dinner. Today you're offering to restart my daughter's treatment and investigating corporate corruption. Why do you care? Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't heard before. My brother had Huntington's adult onset. He was diagnosed at 28, dead by 35. She met Marcus's gaze steadily. I know what this disease does to families. I know what it's like to watch someone you love lose control of their body piece by piece. She gestured toward the window, toward the sprawling city below. I didn't take this job for the money or the power. I took it because Hawthorne Innovations has the potential to help people like my brother, like your daughter. When I discovered the previous administration may have compromised that mission for personal gain, it became personal. The confession hung in the air between them, genuine in a way that corporate statements never were. I'm sorry about your brother, Marcus said finally. Victoria nodded once, acknowledging his sympathy but clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn in the conversation. She straightened, her professional demeanor sliding back into place. So, Mr. Cole, shall we proceed with the expanded access application for Lily? For the first time in over a year, Marcus felt something dangerously close to hope. Yes, please. Victoria nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing. This investigation will take time, and I need your continued cooperation. Would you consider taking a leave of absence from your restaurant job to work with us directly on this matter? I can't afford to take leave, Marcus said immediately. Lily's care is expensive, even with insurance. You misunderstand. I'm offering you a position as a special consultant to Hawthorne Innovations, with appropriate compensation. Your first-hand knowledge of the trial and Lily's response is invaluable to our investigation. Marcus blinked. You want to hire me? To do what, exactly? To help us rebuild the NeuroClear program correctly. To ensure patient experiences are properly documented and respected. And single quotes, she allowed herself a small, tight smile. To keep me honest, I need someone who isn't afraid to refuse service to the CEO when principles are at stake. 3 days later, Marcus found himself sitting in a temporary office on the 68th floor of Hawthorne Innovations. The space was utilitarian compared to Victoria's executive suite, a simple desk, ergonomic chair, and a wall of windows offering the same breathtaking view of the city. On the desk sat a new laptop, a company ID badge, and a contract outlining his position as patient advocacy consultant, with a salary that had made him lightheaded when he first saw the figure. It was 3 times what he made at La Terrace. His phone buzzed with a text from Miss Patel. Lily had a good morning. Less trembling in her hands at breakfast. Dr. Chun's driver just picked us up for her appointment. Marcus smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Lily had received her first dose of NeuroClear the day after their meeting with Victoria. While Dr. Chun had cautioned that improvements wouldn't be immediate, Lily had already reported feeling less stormy in her limbs. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Victoria entered, followed by a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a serious expression. Mr. Cole, this is Howard Benson, our chief legal counsel, Victoria said by way of introduction. He's been briefed on the situation and will be handling the legal aspects of our investigation. Benson nodded curtly. Miss Cole, I understand you've signed all of the confidentiality agreements? Yes, yesterday, Marcus confirmed, uncomfortable under the lawyer's scrutiny. Good, because what we're about to discuss cannot leave this room. Benson placed a sleek leather portfolio on the desk. Ms. Hawthorne has shared your daughter's documentation with me, and I've begun tracing the paper trail of the NeuroClear trial termination. What I've found is troubling. Victoria took a seat across from Marcus. Troubling is an understatement. It appears the data manipulation extended beyond individual patient results. The entire economic viability analysis was falsified. Meaning? Marcus asked. Benson opened the portfolio, meaning someone deliberately inflated the projected manufacturing costs of NeuroClear by nearly 300%, making it appear financially unsustainable even if it proved clinically effective. That's why the trial was really canceled, Victoria added. Not because the drug didn't work, but because someone wanted the board to believe it couldn't be profitably manufactured. Marcus struggled to process the scale of the deception. All those children. Just to help with a corporate merger? It gets worse, Benson continued. The Neurogenex drug that Meridian was developing? Its preliminary results were nowhere near as promising as they claimed. They needed to eliminate NeuroClear as competition because their own drug was failing. Victoria's jaw tightened, and our previous CEO and certain board members knew it. They deliberately tanked a promising treatment to smooth the way for a merger that would have made them personally wealthy, while leaving children like Lily without help. The calculated cruelty of it struck Marcus like a physical blow. Can you prove it? That's where you come in, Victoria said. We need first-hand accounts from trial participants to build an ironclad case. Medical records can be manipulated, data can be altered, but testimonials from parents who saw real improvements in their children? That's harder to dismiss. I've already started contacting other families, Marcus said. 3 have agreed to meet with me tomorrow. Victoria nodded approvingly. Perfect. Howard will prepare them for their depositions once you've gathered preliminary statements. Depositions? Marcus frowned. Are we going to court? Benson and Victoria exchanged a glance. It was Benson who answered. Not exactly. At least not yet. We're building a case to present to the board of directors first. Miss Hawthorne wants to handle this internally if possible, to avoid the years of litigation that would further delay getting NeuroClear to the children who need it. And if the board doesn't cooperate, Marcus pressed, then yes, we go to court, Victoria stated flatly. The FDA takes clinical trial fraud extremely seriously. So does the SEC, given the financial implications for shareholders. Benson checked his watch. I need to prepare for a conference call. Mr. Cole, I'll need those witness statements as soon as possible. With a nod to Victoria, he left the room. Alone with Marcus, Victoria's rigid posture softened slightly. How's Lily doing with the first dose? Good, I think. Less tremors this morning, according to Mrs. Patel. Excellent. Victoria seemed genuinely pleased. Dr. Chun believes she'll show significant improvement within 2 weeks as the medication builds up in her system. Marcus studied the woman across from him, this corporate powerhouse who had gone from adversary to unlikely ally in the span of a few days. There was still something enigmatic about her. A careful distance she maintained even while fighting for his daughter's treatment. Can I ask you something? He ventured. Victoria looked up from her tablet. Of course, your brother ... What was his name? The question clearly caught her off guard. For a moment, her carefully composed expression faltered. Michael, she said finally. His name was Michael, and he had Huntington's like Lily? Yes, though the adult and set form progresses differently than the juvenile variant your daughter has. Marcus nodded. Lily's neurologist explained that. Adult onset usually starts with personality changes and cognitive symptoms before the movement problems become pronounced. With juvenile onset, it's often the opposite. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, impressed by his knowledge. That's correct. Michael's first symptoms were behavioral irritability, impulsiveness, depression. The chorea came later. How old was he when he was diagnosed? 28. He was a musician. A concert pianist. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Brilliant. By the time the movement symptoms began, he'd already lost so much of himself to the cognitive decline. He couldn't remember how to play pieces he'd performed hundreds of times. The pain in her voice was raw, unfiltered in a way Marcus hadn't heard from her before. I'm sorry, he said simply. Victoria nodded once as if accepting his sympathy without wanting to invite further discussion. It was a long time ago. Is that why you're doing this? Because of Michael? She considered the question, her gaze drifting to the city beyond the windows. Partially, but it's more than that. What happened with NeuroClear represents everything wrong with how pharmaceutical companies sometimes operate. Decisions that should be based on science and patient outcomes get corrupted by financial interests. Her focus returned to Marcus, sharper and more intense. I took this position because I believed Hawthorne Innovations could be different. When I discovered how deeply compromised it had become under the previous leadership, I had a choice, walk away or clean house. I chose the latter. A knock at the door interrupted them. Diane appeared, her professional composure slightly frayed. Miss Hawthorne, Dr. Reynolds is here. He's demanding to see you immediately. Victoria straightened, her moment of personal vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Doctor, Reynolds wasn't scheduled to return from his sabbatical for another 2 weeks. He says he received some concerning information about changes to the NeuroClear program and came back early to address them, Diane explained. Victoria and Marcus exchanged a meaningful glance. Reynolds, the previous CEO's brother-in-law who had overseen the NeuroClear trial. Show him to the main conference room, Victoria instructed. Tell him I'll be there in 10 minutes. As Diane left, Victoria turned to Marcus. It seems our investigation has attracted attention sooner than expected. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked. Come with me to the meeting. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. Are you sure that's a good idea? I want Reynolds to see exactly who he's been hurting with his machinations. Besides a coldly strategic smile crossed her face, he has no idea who you are yet. Sometimes the most valuable person in a room is the one others underestimate. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat silently at Victoria's side in the gleaming conference room as Dr. James Reynolds paced at the far end of the table. He was a florid-faced man in his late 50s, with thinning sandy hair and an expensive suit that strained slightly at the buttons. This is completely unacceptable, Victoria, he was saying, his voice rising in barely contained fury. Reactivating a terminated program without proper board review, dispensing experimental medications under dubious compassionate use provision. Do you have any idea of the liability issues you're creating? Victoria remained perfectly calm, watching Reynolds with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen under glass. Oh, Dr. Reynolds, I've reviewed the NeuroClear data extensively. The trial should never have been terminated. The evidence of efficacy is overwhelming. That's not your determination to make unilaterally. Reynolds slammed his hand on the table. Actually, as CEO, reallocation of research resources is within my authority, Victoria replied coolly. The board granted me considerable latitude to restructure our research portfolio after the irregularities of the previous administration came to light. Reynolds' gaze darted to Marcus. And who is this? Why is a non-employee present for a confidential discussion about proprietary research? This is Marcus Cole, our new patient advocacy consultant, Victoria said smoothly. He's helping us reconnect with former trial participants. Reynolds' face paled slightly. Former trial? You're contacting the families from the NeuroClear trial? Under what authority? My authority, Victoria stated flatly. And the more interesting question, Dr. Reynolds, is why that concerns you so much. Are you worried about what they might tell us? The tension in the room was palpable. Reynolds' eyes darted between them, the calculation visible on his face. The NeuroClear trial was terminated for valid scientific and economic, he said finally, his voice lower but no less intent. Resurrecting it now is not only wasteful but potentially dangerous. The side effect profile was remarkably benign, Victoria interrupted. Much better than the comparable data from Meridian's Neurogenics, which you so enthusiastically endorsed as an acquisition target. Reynolds stiffened. I don't know what you're implying, I think you do. Victoria's voice was ice. Just as I think you know exactly why patient data was altered, economic projections were falsified, and children who were showing remarkable improvement were cut off from a medication that was changing their lives. For a moment, the only sound in the conference room was the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Reynolds' face cycled through emotions, shock, anger, calculation, and finally a mask of injured professional dignity. These accusations are outrageous, he said, his voice controlled but trembling slightly. I've dedicated my career to this company. To suggest I would compromise patient welfare for financial gain is not only insulting, but potentially slanderous. Victoria smiled thinly. Interestingly, I never specified what I was implying, yet you immediately jumped to financial impropriety. She opened a folder in front of her. Let's talk about your stock options in Meridian Pharmaceuticals, shall we? The ones you acquired 3 weeks before, recommending we terminate NeuroClear. The color drained from Reynolds' face. Those were perfectly legal investments. Legal, perhaps. Ethical? That's another question entirely. Victoria slid a document across the table. This is a copy of the original efficacy data for patient 17 in the NeuroClear trial. And this, she slid another paper forward, is the version that appeared in the final report to the board. Would you care to explain the discrepancies? Reynolds didn't touch the papers. His eyes darted to Marcus again, reassessing him with new wariness. Who exactly are you? He demanded. Marcus met his gaze steadily. I'm Lily Cole's father, patient 17. Understanding dawned in Reynolds' eyes, followed quickly by alarm. He pushed his chair back from the table. I'm not discussing this further without legal representation. This meeting is over. Of course, Victoria said smoothly. Howard Benson in legal has been expecting your call. He's quite eager to discuss the implications of falsifying clinical trial data submitted to the FDA. I believe the potential penalties include criminal charges. Reynolds stood abruptly. You're making a serious mistake, Victoria. There are powerful people invested in the Meridian acquisition. Yes, I'm discovering exactly how invested certain people were. Victoria remained seated, her posture relaxed, but her eyes razor sharp. You might want to consider your position carefully, Jane. The first person to cooperate with an investigation typically receives the most favorable treat. Reynolds' jaw worked silently for a moment before he turned and stormed out of the conference room, the door swinging shut behind him with a heavy thud. As soon as he was gone, Victoria's composed facade slipped slightly. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. That went about as expected, she said. He'll warn the others, Marcus observed. Undoubtedly, which means we need to move faster than anticipated. She checked her watch. We have a board meeting tomorrow morning at 9. I'm presenting our findings and recommending immediate reinstatement of the NeuroClear program with a full investigation into the data manipulation. Marcus frowned. Do you have enough evidence to convince them with what we've assembled so far, plus Reynolds' reaction just now? Victoria's smile was coldly satisfied. I believe so. But we need those family testimonials to seal it. I'll have them by morning, Marcus promised. The 3 families I contacted are meeting me at 5 tonight. Victoria nodded approvingly. Perfect. Now don't you have a lunch date with a certain young lady? Marcus checked his phone. Yes, Lily should be finishing with Dr. Chun soon. She wanted to try the cafe on the ground floor. The strawberry tarts are particularly good, Victoria said, gathering her papers, or so I'm told. As they walked together to the elevator, Marcus noticed the respectful nod Victoria received from employees they passed, not the fearful deference he had expected for a CEO, but something closer to genuine admiration. It was clear she commanded respect rather than demanded it. Thank you, he said quietly as they waited for the elevator, for including me in that meeting, for letting me see him face to face. Latora glanced at him. You deserve to see the man responsible for your daughter's suffering, and I needed him to see you, to be confronted with the human cost of his actions. The elevator arrived and they stepped in together. As the doors closed, Victoria added, besides, you handled yourself well. No shouting, no accusations. Just your presence was enough to rattle him. I wanted to do more than rattle him, Marcus admitted, but that wouldn't help Lily. No, it wouldn't. Victoria's voice softened almost imperceptibly. The most effective revenge isn't emotional, it's systematic. We're going to dismantle what Reynolds and his associates built piece by piece, and replace it with something that actually helps children like Lily. When the elevator reached the lobby, they found Lily waiting with Dr. Chun near the cafe entrance. She brightened when she spotted Marcus, waving enthusiastically despite the visible tremor in her hand. Daddy, Doctor, Chun showed me brain pictures. My brain has sparkly parts. She rushed forward, her gait uneven but purposeful. Marcus knelt to catch her in a hug, lifting her into his arms with practiced ease. Sparkly parts, huh? Sounds amazing, Doctor. Chun approached, tablet in hand. We were looking at functional MRI scans, he explained with a warm smile. The sparkly parts are areas of neural activity. Lily was quite fascinated. Can we eat now? Lily asked. Doctor, Chun said they have strawberry things that are really good. Victoria, who had been observing from a slight distance, stepped forward. The strawberry tarts are my favorite. Lily regarded her solemnly. You're the medicine lady, the one who's helping make the storms go away. That's one way to put it, Victoria acknowledged, seeming slightly unsure how to interact with the child. Thank you, Lily said with the direct sincerity only children can truly master. The storms were really loud yesterday, but today they're more quiet, like when thunder goes far away. Something in Victoria's carefully composed expression softened. You're very welcome, Lily. I'm glad the medicine is helping. Would you like to have lunch with us? Lily asked, oblivious to the momentary surprise that crossed both adults' faces. Victoria hesitated, checking her watch. I have a conference call in 20 minutes. Please, Lily pressed. You can try the strawberry things too. We can all have matching desserts. Marcus found himself holding back a smile at Victoria's obvious internal conflict. The CEO, with a packed schedule, being gently but insistently waylaid by a 6-year-old's lunch invitation. To his surprise, Victoria nodded. I suppose I could reschedule the call. Strawberry tarts do sound better than discussing quarterly projections. Over lunch, sandwiches followed by the promised strawberry tarts, which lived up to their reputation, Marcus observed a different side of Victoria emerging. With Lily, she was neither the ruthless corporate executive nor the driven investigator, but something more human, more tentative. She listened with genuine interest as Lily explained her elaborate theory about why clouds sometimes looked like animals, and showed unexpected patience when Lily struggled to cut her sandwich with shaking hands. I used to help my brother with things like that, Victoria explained quietly when she caught Marcus watching her assist Lily. It was important to him to maintain dignity, even as the disease progressed. Constant balance, Marcus acknowledged, helping without hovering, supporting without undermining independence. You do it well, Victoria observed. She's remarkably self-assured for a child facing such challenges. Kids are resilient, and Lily's always been special even before the diagnosis. Pride warmed his voice. Her neurologist says her cognitive functions are still testing above average despite the rush. If the NeuroClear can control the physical symptoms, she could have a much more normal childhood, Victoria. That's exactly what the drug was designed to do. Not cure the disease, but manage the symptoms enough to allow patients to maintain quality of life. As Lily happily demolished her strawberry tart, Victoria's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression immediately shifting back to business mode. I need to take this, she said, standing. Thank you for lunch, both of you, Mr. Cole. I'll see you at tomorrow's board meeting. 9 sharp. As she walked away, already speaking quietly into her phone, Lily leaned toward Marcus conspiratorially. I like her, she announced, strawberry filling dotting the corner of her mouth. She's not scary at all, just sad inside. Marcus blinked at his daughter's perceptiveness. Sad? What makes you say that? Lily shrugged, the movement causing a momentary increase in her tremors. Her eyes look like yours did after Mommy left, like there's crying hiding behind them. That evening, after getting Lily settled with Mrs. Patel, Marcus set up his laptop at the small kitchen table in his apartment. The 3 families he'd contacted had agreed to video calls rather than in-person meeting, making the logistics simpler. One by one, they shared stories that mirrored his own children, showing remarkable improvement on NeuroClear, only to have the treatment abruptly terminate. Confusing explanations from trial administrator. Deteriorating conditions after the medication was withdrawn. Brandon could hold a pencil again, one mother said, tears in her eyes. He was learning to write his name. After they stopped the medicine, he could barely hold a spoon. They told us Allison wasn't responding well enough to justify continuing, another father reported bitterly. But she'd gone from wheelchair-bound to walking with a walker. How is that not responding? Each family eagerly agreed to provide formal statements for Victoria's investigation. By midnight, Marcus had compiled their testimonials along with video recordings, evidence that would be difficult for even the most skeptical board member to dismiss. As he finally closed his laptop, exhaustion settling into his bones, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, Mr. Cole reports from families received. Excellent work. Car will collect you at 8 o'clock tomorrow for board meeting. Victoria Hawthorne, asterisk, the formality of the message made him smile. Even in text, she maintained her professional distance. Yet he couldn't forget the way she'd helped Lily cut her sandwich, or the flash of vulnerability when she spoke of her brother. Sad inside, Lily had said. Perhaps his daughter had seen something in Victoria Hawthorne that others missed behind the polished CEO exterior. His phone buzzed again before he could respond. Asterisk P.S. Diane informs me that Reynolds has requested an urgent closed-door meeting with several board members tonight. The game is afoot. Sleep well. Tomorrow will be interesting. Asterisk. Marcus stared at the message. The implications clear. Reynolds was rallying his allies. Tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't just be a presentation, it would be a battlefield. The sleek black town car arrived precisely at 8 o'clock the next morning. Marcus had been ready since 7, unable to sleep past dawn, his mind racing with the enormity of what lay ahead. He dressed in his only suit navy blue, slightly worn at the cuffs, purchased 3 years ago for a cousin's wedding. It felt like armor, inadequate but necessary for the corporate battlefield he was about to enter. Lily had been fascinated by the car and its uniformed driver. Are you going to a fancy party, Daddy? She'd asked as Miss Patel arrived to watch her for the day. Sort of, Marcus had answered, kneeling to hug her. I'm going to a meeting to help make sure you keep getting your medicine. Her small face had grown serious. To fight the bad storm makers? The childish terminology had nearly broken his heart. Something like that, Sweetie. Now, as the car glided through morning traffic toward the towering Hawthorne building, Marcus reviewed the presentation on the tablet Victoria had provided. The evidence they'd compiled was damning: falsified data, manipulated economic projections, suspicious stock transactions, and most powerful, the testimonials from families whose children had been cut off from life-changing medication. Monsieur Cole, the driver said, interrupting his thoughts. Ms. Hawthorne asked me to give you this. He passed back a small leather portfolio. Inside, Marcus found a Hawthorne Innovations employee badge with his name and photograph, security clearance codes for the executive floor, and a handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. Asterisk, the boardroom is full of sharks. Don't show fear. Remember what we're fighting for. The asterisk, the simple message, steadied him. This wasn't about corporate politics or power play. It was about Lily and children like her. When the car pulled up to the building, Victoria was waiting in the lobby, engaged in intense conversation with Howard Benson. She looked up as Marcus approached, a brief flash of approval crossing her face at his suit and tie. "Good morning," she said briskly. "We have a situation." "Reynolds?" Marcus guessed. She nodded. "He's been busy." 3 board members requested postponement of today's presentation, citing concerns about procedural irregularities. Fortunately, as CEO, I have the authority to deny such requests when time-sensitive matters are involved. "What else?" Marcus asked, sensing there was more. Howard Benson adjusted his glasses. "We've received notice that Meridian Pharmaceuticals has filed an injunction attempting to prevent discussion of their proprietary data in today's meeting. Can they do that?" "They can try," Victoria said with cold determination. "It's a delay tactic, nothing more. The judge won't rule for at least 48 hours, and by then, the board will have already heard our findings." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. As the doors closed, Victoria's professional demeanor slipped just slightly, revealing a glimpse of the strain she was under. "Reynolds and his allies control 4 votes on the 12-person board," she explained quietly. "I have 3 solid supporters. The other 5 claim to be undecided, but at least 2 are rumored to have financial ties to the Meridian deal. So we need to convince all 5 undecideds?" Marcus asked. "No." Victoria's mouth tightened into a determined line. "We need to make the evidence so overwhelming that even Reynolds' allies can't defend him without implicating themselves." The elevator opened directly into an antechamber outside the board. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see 11 people seated around a massive oval table, with 1 empty chair, Victoria's at the head. Dr. Reynolds was among them, leaning in to speak urgently to a silver-haired man whose expensive watch gleamed under the recessed lighting. "That's Gerald Winters, our chairman," Victoria murmured. "Reynolds has been in his ear for years. He was the previous CEO's closest ally on the board." A stern-looking woman with a tablet approached them. "Miss Hawthorne, the board is ready." However, she glanced pointedly at Marcus. "They've expressed concern about the presence of non-board members during this sensitive discussion." "Mr. Cole is essential to my presentation as our patient advocacy consultant, Sharon," Victoria replied smoothly. "The board bylaws clearly permit subject matter experts to attend upon the CEO's request." Sharon's expression suggested this interpretation was debatable, but she merely nodded and moved to open the boardroom door. "Ready?" Victoria asked Marcus, her voice low. "As I'll ever be," he replied honestly. The conversation in the boardroom died as they entered, 11 pairs of eyes tracking them with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Marcus felt acutely conscious of his worn suit cuffs and department store tie among the bespoke tailoring and designer accessories surrounding the table. Victoria took her place at the head of the table with practiced confidence. "Good morning. Thank you all for making time for this critical presentation." Reynolds immediately leaned forward. "Before we begin, I must object to the presence of an outsider during discussion of proprietary company matters. This is highly irregular, Victoria. Emmer Cole is a Hawthorne employee as of this," Victoria responded. "His credentials and confidentiality agreements are in order. As our patient advocacy consultant, his expertise is directly relevant to today's discussion." "Patient advocacy consultant?" the silver-haired chairman echoed, his tone skeptical. "I don't recall board approval for such a position. Creation of consultancy roles falls under executive discretion, not board approval," Victoria countered. "Now, if there are no substantive objections, I'd like to proceed with our presentation." She nodded to Sharon, who dimmed the lights and activated the room's projection system. The first slide appeared on the wall screen, a simple title: "Neuroclear Clinical Trial. Evidence of Data Manipulation and Financial Impropriety." A ripple of murmurs circled the table. Reynolds' face flushed dark red. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "These accusations are completely unfounded and potentially slanderous. If they're unfounded, you have nothing to worry about," Victoria replied evenly. "I'm simply presenting the evidence my team has uncovered. The board can draw its own conclusion." For the next 30 minutes, Victoria methodically laid out their case. She compared the original trial data with the altered versions presented to the board. She detailed the suspicious timing of stock purchases and the falsified manufacturing cost projections. Throughout, she was precise, unemotional, and utterly devastating in her presentation of facts. When she reached the section on patient impact, she turned to Marcus. "Mr. Cole can provide first-hand perspective on how these decisions affected trial participants." All eyes turned to him. Marcus swallowed hard, then began to speak. He didn't have Victoria's polished corporate delivery, but he had something more powerful: authentic experience and righteous anger held carefully in check. "My daughter Lily was patient 17 in the Neuroclear trial," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. She has juvenile onset Huntington's disease. Before the trial, she could barely hold a crayon. She had trouble walking without falling. After 12 weeks on NeuroClear, she was drawing again. She could walk to the park without her wheelchair. He paused, making eye contact with each board member in turn. Then the trial was terminated. No explanation, no transition plan, nothing. Just a letter saying the treatment was discontinued, and within weeks, my daughter started losing everything she had gained. The board members' expressions had begun to shift, discomfort, concern, even shock appearing on several faces. What Mr. Cole didn't know, Victoria continued, was that his daughter's dramatic improvement was deliberately obscured in the final report to this board. Patient 17's actual improvement rate of 63% was recorded as just 12% in the doc receipt. She clicked to the next slide, a side-by-side comparison of Lily's actual results versus the altered data. The discrepancy was impossible. This pattern was repeated across multiple patients, Victoria continued, displaying more examples. The actual efficacy of NeuroClear was nearly 5 times greater than what was reported to this board when you voted to terminate the program. The silver-haired chairman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. These are serious allegations, Victoria. What possible motive would Dr. Reynolds or anyone else have for misrepresenting these results? Victoria clicked to the next slide, a complex chart of stock holdings and financial transactions. The motive becomes clear when you examine the timing of these events in relation to the Meridian Pharmaceuticals acquisition talks. She walked them through the timeline, how the falsification of data began shortly after initial acquisition discussion, how certain executives and board members had acquired Meridian stock before the NeuroClear trial was terminated, how the inflated manufacturing cost projections coincided with the final valuation negotiations for Meridian. In summary, Victoria concluded, it appears that NeuroClear was deliberately sabotaged to eliminate competition for Meridian's inferior drug, Neurogenex, thereby increasing Meridian's market value ahead of our acquisition offer. Those who orchestrated this deception stood to gain millions personally from the resulting deal, while children like Lily Cole lost access to a treatment that was changing their lives. The room fell silent as the final slide disappeared. The lights came back up, revealing faces stunned by the weight of the evidence they'd just seen. Reynolds broke the silence, his voice strained with barely controlled fury. This is a witch hunt based on circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. Victoria has cherry-picked data points to construct a narrative that serves her own agenda. What agenda would that be? Asked a woman near the far end of the table. Dr. Eleanor Chang, one of Victoria's known supporters on the board. She's been looking for a reason to kill the Meridian acquisition since taking over as CEO. Reynolds shot back. This is nothing but a smokescreen to justify that predetermined decision. Victoria remained icily composed. If the evidence is merely circumstantial, Dr. Reynolds should have no objection to a full independent audit of the NeuroClear trial data. An audit would take months, Reynolds protested. The Meridian acquisition window closes in 3 weeks. I'm aware, Victoria replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. How fortunate, then, that we've already begun compiling the original data, Mr. Cole. Marcus opened the portfolio he'd brought, removing a flash drive which he slid across the table to the chairman. This contains the original, unaltered trial data for all 78 patients, along with video testimonials from 15 families whose children showed significant improvement during the trial. The chairman stared at the flash drive as if it might explode, then slowly picked it up. You've had access to the original trial data all this time? No, Victoria clarified. We've been reconstructing it from multiple sources, patient records maintained by treating physicians, backup servers that weren't properly purged, and direct accounts from trial participants. It's taken considerable effort. A silver-haired woman near the chairman frowned. Why not simply bring these concerns to the board initially rather than conducting your own investigation? Given the potential involvement of board members in the alleged misconduct, I needed conclusive evidence before proceeding, Victoria replied evenly. The integrity of the investigation required discretion. Reynolds stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. This is nothing but a character assassination. Victoria hired this waiter, he gestured dismissively at Marcus, to fabricate a sympathetic narrative. Where's the scientific rigor? Where's the peer review? The contempt in Reynolds' voice when he said waiter sent a flush of anger through Marcus. He opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria's hand on his arm stopped him. Her touch was light, barely perceptible. But the message was clear. Asterisk, let him dig his own grave. Asterisk. I find it interesting that Dr. Reynolds knows Miss Gorcole was previously employed as a waiter, Victoria observed, her tone conversational. That information wasn't included in our presentation. One wonders how the doctor came by such knowledge about the father of patient 17. Reynolds faltered, realizing his mistake. 1. I was briefed on his background. By whom? Victoria pressed. And why investigate Mr. Cole personally, unless you already knew exactly who patient 17 was? Information that should have been anonymized in the trial data. A murmur spread around the table. Reynolds' face had gone from red to ashen. Dr. Chang spoke up again. I move that we immediately authorize a comprehensive independent audit of the NeuroClear trial, with all findings to be reported directly to the full board. Seconded, said a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses whom Marcus hadn't been introduced to. The chairman looked deeply uncomfortable but nodded. The motion is on the floor. Those in favor? One by one, hands went up. Reynolds watched in visible horror as his allies, reading the shifting winds, voted for the audit. Only one board member, a florid-faced man who hadn't spoken throughout the presentation, kept his hand down alongside Reynolds. 10 in favor, 2 against, the chairman announced. The motion carries. The audit will proceed immediately. And what about NeuroClear in the meantime? Victoria asked. Children like Lily Cole shouldn't have to wait months for an audit to confirm what we already know. The drug works, and withholding it is unconscionable. Reynolds found his voice again. You can't possibly suggest restarting a terminated program before the audit is complete. The liability alone, actually, Howard Benson interjected smoothly. We can proceed with the expanded access program for the original trial participants under FDA compassionate use provision. This wouldn't constitute a full restart of the program, merely continuation of treatment for patients who demonstrated clear benefit. I move that we authorize the expanded access program immediately, Dr. Cheng said promptly. The vote was 9-3 this time. Reynolds had apparently convinced one more ally to stand firm, but it was still a decisive victory. As the meeting adjourned, Reynolds brushed past Marcus, his shoulder deliberately colliding with Marcus's arm. Enjoy your moment, he muttered, low enough that only Marcus could hear. This isn't over. Marcus maintained his composure, watching as Reynolds exited with the 2 board members who had supported him. Only when the door closed did he allow himself to breathe normally again. The remaining board members gathered around Victoria, their earlier skepticism replaced with concerned questions about next steps and the audit process. Marcus stood slightly apart, suddenly feeling out of place in this world of corporate power plays and multi-billion-dollar decisions. Victoria, seeming to sense his discomfort, smoothly extracted herself from the group and approached him. We won, she said simply. For now, Marcus replied, Reynolds' parting threat still echoing in his mind. For now is enough to get NeuroClear back to the children who need it, Victoria countered. The rest, the audit, the potential criminal charges, the Meridian acquisition, that will all unfold in the coming weeks. But Lily and the others don't have to wait for justice to run its course. The reality of what they'd accomplished finally began to sink in. Lily would continue receiving the medication that had given her back her mobility, her drawing, her childhood. Thank you, he said, the words entirely inadequate for what he felt. Victoria's professional mask slipped just slightly, a genuine smile briefly illuminating her face. Don't thank me yet. Reynolds wasn't bluffing, he'll fight back. But for today, we celebrate. I should call Mrs. Patel. Let her know about Lily's treatment. Victoria nodded. Of course. Use my office. It's more private. I need to coordinate with Howard about next steps anyway. 10 minutes later, Marcus sat in Victoria's expansive office. Having just finished his call with Miss Patel, he gazed out at the city skyline, still processing the morning's events. A week ago, he had been a waiter struggling to make ends meet, watching his daughter's health deteriorate day by day. Now he was sitting in the CEO's office of a pharmaceutical giant, having just helped secure treatment that could transform Lily's life. The door opened and Victoria entered, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her since they met. She'd removed her suit jacket, and the crisp white blouse underneath made her look somehow more approachable, less the corporate warrior and more the woman who had helped Lily cut her sandwich. Everything okay with your daughter? She asked, crossing to a concealed bar in the corner. Yes, Mrs. Patel says she's having a good day. The tremors are noticeably less severe. Victoria nodded, pleased. Dr. Chun believes we'll see dramatic improvement within the next 2 weeks as the medication reaches optimal levels in her system. She opened the bar, revealing an impressive collection of spirits. I think this calls for a small celebration. Do you drink scotch? Marcus raised an eyebrow. It's at 10:30 in the morning? An exception for exceptional circumstances, Victoria replied, already pouring 2 fingers into crystal tumblers. Besides, after facing down Reynolds and the board, I'd say we've earned it. She handed him a glass and sat not behind her desk, but in one of the comfortable chairs arranged around a small table near the window. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus joined her. To Lily, Victoria said, raising her glass. And to all the children who will benefit from NeuroClear. To NeuroClear, Marcus echoed, taking a small sip. The scotch was unlike anything he'd tasted before, complex, warming, probably more expensive than his monthly rent. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension of the past days finally beginning to ebb. What happens now? Marcus finally asked. Victoria swirled the amber liquid in her glass, considering the question. The audit will proceed. Given what we've uncovered, I expect it will confirm our findings. Reynolds and his allies will face serious consequences, likely termination and possibly criminal charges, depending on how the SEC views the stock transaction. And your position? Taking on powerful board members is risky, even for a CEO. A shadow of something concerned perhaps crossed her face. My position is complicated. The chairman and I have a cordial but not particularly warm relationship. He's part of the old guard, and while he voted for the audit, I suspect that was more about protecting the company from liability than supporting my leadership. It was the most candid assessment of her own vulnerability that Victoria had shared, and Marcus recognized it as a small but significant lowering of her guard. But you did the right thing anyway, he observed. Victoria met his gaze directly. Yes, some things matter more than career security, like her brother, Marcus thought. Like Lily, he was beginning to understand that beneath Victoria's polished corporate exterior was a woman who had known personal loss, who had felt the same helplessness watching a loved one suffer that he experienced daily with Lily. What about your job at La Terrace? Victoria asked, changing the subject. Paolo has called my office 3 times asking when you'll be returning. Marcus hadn't given the restaurant much thought since their investigation began. I'm not sure, he admitted. This consultancy position, is it still necessary now that the board has approved resuming NeuroClear? More necessary than ever, Victoria replied firmly. We're entering the rebuilding phase now. The expanded access program needs to be structured properly, patient advocacy protocols established, proper oversight. Your perspective is invaluable. She hesitated, then added more quietly, besides, I've grown accustomed to having someone around who isn't afraid to refuse service to the CEO when principles are at stake. Before Marcus could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression immediately shifting back to business mode. Reynolds is giving an unauthorized press briefing in the lobby, she said, standing abruptly, claiming whistleblower status and alleging corporate misconduct in the reopening of NeuroClear. Howard says he's naming both of us specifically. Marcus set down his glass. So much for celebrating. This is just the beginning, Victoria said grimly. Reynolds is fighting for his career, his reputation, and potentially his freedom. He'll use every weapon at his disposal. What do we do? Victoria was already moving toward the door, her CEO armor firmly back in place. We counter with the truth. Mr. Cole, how do you feel about press conferences? The Hawthorne Innovations lobby had transformed into an impromptu media circus. Television cameras, reporters with microphones, and photographers with long lenses formed a semicircle around Dr. James Reynolds, who stood at an improvised podium, his face grave with practiced concern. Marcus and Victoria watched from the mezzanine overlooking the scene, out of sight but able to hear Reynolds clearly as his voice echoed through the marble atrium. Single quotes. Reckless disregard for scientific protocol and patient safety, Reynolds was saying. CEO Victoria Hawthorne has circumvented established procedures to resurrect a drug program that was terminated due to serious concerns about long-term efficacy and side effect. Howard Benson appeared beside them, tablet in hand. He's claiming whistleblower status, he murmured, alleging that he's being targeted for raising legitimate scientific objections to NeuroClear. Victoria's expression remained impassive, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulder. Is security ready? Benson nodded. Whenever you give the word. Below, Reynolds continued his performance. Miss Hawthorne has even gone so far as to hire the father of a trial participant, a waiter with no scientific or medical background, as a so-called consultant, to help push her agenda forward. Marcus felt a flush of anger at the dismissive way Reynolds emphasized his former occupation, as if serving food somehow made him incapable of understanding his daughter's medical need. The press is eating this up, Benson observed grimly. We need to respond before his narrative sets. Victoria turned to Marcus. Are you ready for this? Once we go down there, your privacy's gone. Your face, your name, your connection to Lily, it all becomes public. Marcus hadn't considered that angle. The thought of exposing Lily to public scrutiny made him hesitate. Will this affect her? Put her at risk? Not physically, Victoria answered honestly. But there may be media attention, questions from strangers, social media discussions. It's not easy being in the spotlight. Marcus thought of Lily's brave face each morning as she struggled with her braces. Her determination to draw despite the tremors, her unflagging spirit in the face of a disease that was slowly stealing her childhood. If it helps secure her treatment and helps other children like her, she would want me to do it, he said with quiet certainty. Victoria studied him for a moment, then nodded. Howard, tell security we're ready. What happened next unfolded with military precision. 2 security officers appeared at the mezzanine, escorting them down a private elevator that opened directly behind the lobby's main reception desk. At Victoria's signal, a 3rd officer cut Reynolds' microphone mid-sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of security announced, Hawthorne Innovations CEO Victoria Hawthorne will now make an official statement. The sea of reporters turned as one, cameras swinging toward Victoria as she stepped forward with Marcus at her side. Reynolds stood frozen, his narrative hijacked, forced to remain in place or risk appearing to flee. Good morning, Victoria began, her voice calm but forceful. I'm here to address the misleading claims just made by Dr. James Reynolds, and to share the truth about the NeuroClear program with full transparency. She paused, surveying the assembled media. This morning, the Hawthorne Innovations Board of Directors voted overwhelmingly to reinstate the NeuroClear Expanded Access Program after reviewing evidence that the original clinical trial data was deliberately falsified under the previous administration. A ripple of murmurs spread through the press corps. Cameras clicked rapidly. The board has also authorized an independent audit to investigate how and why this promising treatment for children with juvenile onset Huntington's disease was prematurely terminated despite showing remarkable efficacy. Victoria gestured to Marcus. This is Marcus Cole, our patient advocacy consultant. His daughter Lily was patient 17 in the NeuroClear trial, one of dozens of children who showed significant improvement before the treatment was inexplicably withdrawn. Marcus stepped forward, his heart hammering but his voice steady as he addressed the reporters. My daughter Lily is 6 years old. Before NeuroClear, the tremors from her Huntington's disease were so severe she couldn't hold a crayon. After 12 weeks of treatment, she was drawing pictures again, walking without falling, being a child again. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, without warning or explanation, Hawthorne Innovations terminated the trial. Within weeks, Lily began losing all the progress she had made. When I asked why, I was told the drug wasn't effective enough to continue development. The reporters were completely silent now, captivated by the human story behind the corporate machinations. What I learned this week, Marcus continued, is that Lily's improvement and the improvement of many other children was deliberately misrepresented in reports to the company's board. Someone altered the data to make NeuroClear appear less effective than it actually was. Victoria stepped forward again. We have uncovered evidence suggesting this deception was perpetrated to clear the way for Hawthorne's acquisition of a competing pharmaceutical company with an inferior but more profitable drug in development. Reynolds pushed forward, his face mottled with rage. This is slander. You're making these accusations with no proof. The board has seen the proof, Doctor, Reynolds. Victoria replied, as will federal regulators and, if necessary, criminal prosecutors. Your personal financial investments in Meridian Pharmaceuticals made just before you recommended terminating NeuroClear are particularly concerning. The reporters erupted with questions, cameras swinging between Victoria and Reynolds like spectators at a tennis match. Reynolds' face had gone from red to ashen. A woman from Reuters shouted above the din, Dr. Reynolds, did you personally profit from the termination of the NeuroClear program? Reynolds opened his mouth and closed it without speaking. His eyes darted around the lobby as if seeking escape. Dr. Reynolds, Victoria continued, her voice cutting through the chaos, acquired Meridian stock worth over $2 million 3 weeks before recommending NeuroClear's termination. The audit will determine whether this constitutes illegal insider trading. Another reporter called out, Ms. Hawthorne, when will affected children resume treatment? Immediately, Victoria answered, the expanded access program is being reactivated today, Dr. Chun, our chief pediatric neurologist, is already contacting the families of former trial participants. As the press conference continued, Marcus watched Reynolds retreat, slipping away through a side door as attention focused on Victoria's detailed explanation of the next steps for NeuroClear. He felt a complex mixture of emotion, satisfaction at seeing Reynolds exposed, hope for Lily's future, and a strange sense of displacement, as if he were watching himself from outside his body, a waiter somehow catapulted into the center of a corporate scandal that would likely make national headlines. By the time the press conference concluded, Marcus was exhausted, his adrenaline finally crashing after days of investigation and confrontation. Victoria, however, seemed energized by the challenge, fielding questions with precision and authority, never once appearing flustered or uncertain. You were perfect, she told him as they finally stepped away from the cameras. Authentic, compelling, exactly what we needed to counter Reynolds' narrative. I just told the truth, Marcus said simply. Sometimes that's the most powerful strategy of all, Victoria replied. She checked her watch. I need to brief the executive team on this morning's developments. Howard will get you home. I'm sure you're eager to see Lily. Marcus nodded gratefully. The thought of holding his daughter, of telling her that her medicine was coming back for good, was overwhelming. As promised, Howard arranged for a car to take Marcus home. The drive across town was surreal. He kept expecting to wake up and find himself back in his normal life, preparing for another shift at La Terrace. When he arrived at his apartment building, he was shocked to find 2 news vans already parked outside. A reporter and cameraman approached as he stepped from the car. Mr. Cole, can we get a statement about your daughter's condition and the NeuroClear scandal? Marcus froze, unprepared for this invasion of his private life so quick. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Victoria. I see the media found you already, she said without preamble. Are you inside your apartment? No. I just arrived. There are reporters outside. Get inside and don't answer any questions. I've arranged for private security to be there in 10 minutes. They'll keep the media at a respectful distance. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for her foresight. Thank you. I should have warned you this might happen, Victoria admitted, a rare note of contrition in her voice. The story is exploding online. A corporate conspiracy that harmed sick children. It's media catnip. Marcus managed to push past the reporters with a polite no comment and made it to his apartment, where he found Mrs. Patel looking anxious and Lily blissfully unaware of the commotion, absorbed in a coloring book at the kitchen table. Daddy! She jumped up when she saw him, her movements more fluid than they had been in months. Look at my drawing. I made a castle with a dragon that protects it instead of attacks it. His name is Fred. Marcus swept her into his arms, holding her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. In that moment, the press, Reynolds, the corporate intrigue, none of it mattered compared to the miracle of his daughter's improving condition. It's beautiful, sweet pea, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I have good news. The medicine is going to keep coming forever. No more stopping. Lily pulled back to look at his face, her eyes wide. Really? The storms won't come back? The medicine will keep them away, Marcus promised, choosing his words carefully. NeuroClear wasn't a cure. Huntington's would still progress eventually, but it could give Lily years of improved quality of life. Years of childhood she deserved to experience. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Asterisk security in place. Reynolds has been suspended pending investigation. Board chairman called emergency session for tomorrow. This isn't over yet. Asterisk. Marcus looked at his daughter, now chattering excitedly about showing her improved drawing skills to her teacher. Then at the message from the CEO, who had changed both their lives in less than a week. No, it wasn't over. But for the first time in over a year, The future held more promise than fear. The next 3 days unfolded in a blur of media coverage, legal maneuvering, and sudden disorienting fame. Marcus woke on the fourth morning to find his face on the front page of the national business section, standing beside Victoria at the press conference. The headline read, "Whistleblower Dad and CEO Expose Pharma Fraud. Revive Hope for Children." It was surreal seeing himself described as a whistleblower and patient advocate rather than simply waiter or single father. Equally surreal was the growing pile of interview requests from major news outlets, medical journals, and even a documentary filmmaker. Victoria had assigned him a media liaison from Hawthorne's PR department, a sharp, efficient woman named Rebecca, who fielded the requests and helped him navigate this unfamiliar terrain. "Good morning," she said when he answered her call that morning. "Just checking in before your board testimony today. How are you feeling?" Marcus glanced over at Lily, who sat at their small kitchen table eating cereal, the spoon now steady enough in her hand that milk rarely spilled. Her improvement continued daily, each small victory a miracle to witness. "Nervous," he admitted, "but ready. The car will pick you up at 9:30. Hawthorne would like to brief you beforehand." The emergency board session had been called specifically to address Reynolds' counter-allegations. Despite his suspension, Reynolds had powerful allies on the board who insisted his version of events deserved equal consideration. After hanging up, Marcus helped Lily get ready for school, a routine that had become markedly easier as her motor control improved. Patel would take her today. The private security team Victoria had arranged would ensure no reporters bothered them. "Daddy, am I famous now?" Lily asked as he tied her shoe. "Josie at school said she saw my picture on her mom's computer." Marcus hesitated, uncertain how to explain their sudden notoriety to a 6-year-old. "Not famous exactly, sweet pea. People are interested in your medicine and how it's helping you." Lily considered this with the solemn thoughtfulness she often displayed. "Is that why those people with cameras were outside yesterday?" "Yes, but they won't bother you at school. And you don't have to talk to them if you don't want to." She nodded, apparently satisfied. "I like the medicine lady. She looks sad, but she's nice inside." Marcus smiled, once again struck by his daughter's perceptiveness. "Yes, she is." The car arrived precisely on time. A different driver today, but the same quiet efficiency. As they pulled away from the curbs, Marcus noticed 2 reporters still camped outside his building, despite the security team keeping them at a respectful distance. Victoria was waiting in her office when he arrived, reviewing documents with Howard Benson and another man Marcus hadn't met before. "Mr. Cole, this is Dr. Edward Winters," Victoria said, gesturing to the stranger. He was the original lead researcher on the NeuroClear trial. Single quotes, the man stood to shake Marcus's hand. He was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and the intense gaze of someone accustomed to scrutinizing details. "Mr. Cole, Doctor," Winters said warmly. "I remember Lily well. A remarkable girl. Her response to NeuroClear was one of our most promising cases. Dr. Winters has been in Boston, as you mentioned," Victoria explained, "but not at a research hospital. After he resigned from Hawthorne, he was essentially blackballed from the industry. He's been teaching undergraduate chemistry." Dr. Winters nodded grimly. "When I raised concerns about the data manipulation, Reynolds made it clear my career in pharmaceutical research was over, unless I kept quiet." "But now you're willing to testify?" Marcus asked. "I've been following the news. When I saw you and Hawthorne had reopened the whole case, single quotes." He smiled tightly. "Let's just say I've been waiting for this moment. I never stopped believing in NeuroClear." Victoria gestured for everyone to sit. "Dr. Winters will testify before you do, establishing the scientific validity of the original trial results. Howard will present the documentary evidence of data tampering. You'll be the closing witness, providing the human impact perspective." "What about Reynolds?" Marcus asked. Howard's expression darkened. "He's bringing reinforcements. Former CEO Philip Grayson is flying in to support Reynolds' version of events. They'll argue the decision to terminate NeuroClear was based on legitimate scientific and business considerations." Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Grayson's involvement complicates things. He still has significant influence with certain board members." "Will this threaten the expanded access program?" Marcus asked, anxiety rising. Lily had only just started improving again. He couldn't bear the thought of another reversal. "No," Victoria assured him. "That decision is final. What's at stake today is whether Reynolds and potentially others face consequences for their actions, and whether the full NeuroClear development program gets reinstated for all eligible patients, not just the original trial participants." Dr. Winters leaned forward. "The expanded access program helps the 78 children from the original trial, but there are thousands more who could benefit if NeuroClear receives full approval." The gravity of the situation settled on Marcus. This was no longer just about Lily. It was about all the children like her children whose parents were still watching them deteriorate without hope of treatment. The boardroom was more crowded than during their previous appearance. In addition to the 12 board members, several executives and legal representatives lined the walls. At the far end of the table sat Dr. Reynolds and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s whom Marcus assumed was former CEO Philip Grayson. Victoria took her place at the head of the table with the same composed confidence she'd shown at their first board meeting, though Marcus thought he detected a new tension in her posture. "Thank you all for convening on such short short notice, she began. As you know, serious allegations have been made regarding the termination of the NeuroClear clinical trial. Today, you'll hear testimony from multiple perspectives before reaching a determination on next steps. The silver-haired chairman nodded. In the interest of fairness, we'll alternate between witnesses. Dr. Reynolds will begin, followed by Dr. Winters, then Miss Grayson, and finally Mr. Cole. Reynolds stood, straightening his tie before addressing the board. Gone was the angry, flustered man from the lobby confrontation. In his place stood a composed, authoritative, scientific voice. Members of the board, he began, I want to be clear that I harbor no ill will toward the children in the NeuroClear trial. Every decision I made was based on rigorous scientific analysis and concern for patient safety. He proceeded to present a carefully constructed narrative. The data hadn't been falsified, but rather reinterpreted using more conservative statistical methods. The initial positive results weren't sustained in longer-term projections. Manufacturing issues made the drug economically unfeasible. The Meridian acquisition represented a more viable path to treating these children. It was convincing, measured, and utterly at odds with the evidence Marcus had seen. Reynolds never raised his voice, never showed the anger that had revealed his true nature in their previous encounters. He simply presented himself as a careful scientist who had made difficult but necessary decisions. When Dr. Winters took the floor, the contrast was immediate. Where Reynolds projected calm authority, Winters vibrated with barely contained righteous indignation. I supervised the daily operations of the NeuroClear trial, he began. I personally reviewed every patient chart, every data point, every adverse event report. The improvements we saw weren't statistical anomalies or placebo effects. They were real, consistent, and life-changing. He displayed slides showing the original data charts tracking tremor reduction, cognitive improvements, quality of life assessments, all demonstrating NeuroClear's clear efficacy. When I submitted my final report to Dr. Reynolds, it contained none of these conservative reinterpretations he mentioned. It showed unambiguous success. Winters' voice tightened. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting and told the trial was being terminated. When I objected, I was informed my position was being eliminated in a departmental restructuring. Former CEO Grayson spoke next, his manner patrician and slightly condescending. He supported Reynolds' version of events, emphasizing the financial responsibilities of a publicly traded company and the tough but necessary decision executives sometimes have to make. Ms. Hawthorne, he concluded with a dismissive glance in Victoria's direction, while undoubtedly well-intentioned, lacks the experience to understand the complex calculus involved in drug development decisions. Her emotionally driven revival of NeuroClear may provide feel-good headlines, but it risks the company's long-term viability. The subtle sexism in his tone pain. Victoria, as emotional and inexperienced despite her impressive credentials, didn't go unnoticed. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, it was Marcus's turn. As he stood to address the board, he felt strangely calm. The high-powered executives, the corporate intrigue, the millions of dollars at stake, none of it intimidated him anymore. He was simply a father speaking truth for his daughter. I'm not a scientist or a business executive, he began. I can't debate statistical methods or profit margins. What I can tell you about is my daughter Lily. He described Lily's journey, the devastating diagnosis at age 4, the progressive loss of motor function, the moment they learned about the NeuroClear trial and dared to hope. When Lily started NeuroClear, she began to come back to us piece by piece. Her hands steadied, her walk improved. She could draw against something she loves more than anything. His voice remained steady, though emotion underlay every word. Then the trial ended and we watched her slip away again day by day. Marcus looked directly at Grayson and Reynolds. Talk about complex calculus and tough decisions. For families like mine, the calculus is simple. Our children are suffering, and NeuroClear helps them suffer less. That's not emotional. It's factual. He placed a folder on the table. Inside are testimonials from 14 other families from the trial. Their experiences mirror ours. These aren't anecdotes or outliers. They represent the true impact of NeuroClear, the impact that was erased from your reports. The board chamber fell silent as Marcus returned to his seat. Victoria gave him a small nod of approval, her eyes conveying what she couldn't say aloud. Asterisk, you did perfectly, asterisk. The board deliberated for nearly 3 hours. Marcus waited in Victoria's office, alternating between checking news updates about the NeuroClear scandal on his phone and answering texts from Mrs. Missy Patel about Lily's latest drawing, a colorful scene of butterflies that showed remarkable improvement in fine motor control compared to her artwork from just a week earlier. Victoria paced near the window, her usual composure fraying slightly at the edges. It shouldn't be taking this long, she said, more to herself than to Marcus. The evidence is overwhelming. Grayson was convincing, Marcus observed. That patrician authority, the way he dismissed complex ethical issues as naive emotionalism. Victoria's mouth tightened. Philip Grayson built his career on that act. It's particularly effective on people who mistake arrogance for competence. Before Marcus could respond, Diane appeared at the door. They're ready. The atmosphere in the boardroom was tense as they returned. Reynolds and Grayson sat side by side, their expressions carefully neutral. The chairman looked grave as he called the meeting to order. After reviewing all testimony and evidence presented today, The board has reached several determinations, he began. First, regarding the NeuroClear program, we unanimously support not only the continued expanded access program for original trial participants, but also the full reinstatement of NeuroClear's development track with appropriate funding and staffing. Marcus felt a wave of relief so powerful it made him lightheaded. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about all children with juvenile Huntington's disease, present and future. Second, regarding personnel matters, the chairman continued, Dr. James Reynolds is hereby terminated from Hawthorne Innovations, effective immediately for ethical violations and breach of fiduciary duty. The board has authorized full cooperation with any regulatory or criminal investigations that may follow. Reynolds's composure finally cracked. He half rose from his chair, his face flushed. This is outrageous. You can't possibly, James. Grayson cut him off, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Not now, the chairman continued as if there had been no interruption. Third, the board has commissioned an independent investigation into all decisions made during former CEO Grayson's tenure that involved potential conflicts of interest, particularly regarding the proposed Meridian acquisition. Single quotes, Grayson's face remained impassive, but Marcus noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Finally, the chairman concluded, the board wishes to formally commend CEO Victoria Hawthorne for her decisive action in uncovering this situation, and Mr. Marcus Cole for his courage in bringing these matters to light. This company was founded with a mission to improve patients' lives. We lost sight of that mission, and we are grateful to those who have helped us find our way back. As the meeting adjourned, the room filled with conversations and movement. Reynolds stormed out, ignoring reporters waiting in the lobby. Grayson lingered, approaching Victoria with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to landing on his feet regardless of circumstances. Well played, Victoria, he said, his tone conveying both respect and warning, but board politics are fickle. Today's hero is tomorrow's scapegoat. I should know. Victoria met his gaze evenly. The difference, Philip, is that I never forgot who were really working. She nodded toward Marcus. Not shareholders, not our own advancement, patients. Grayson's smile tightened. He glanced at Marcus, offering a curt nod before departing with his entourage of lawyers and assistants. Is it really over? Marcus asked as the room emptied. Victoria shook her head. The SEC investigation is just beginning. There will be depositions, possibly trials, but the immediate battle, she allowed herself a small smile. Yes. That part is over. We won. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, Marcus stood in the playground of Westside Elementary School, watching through the chain-link fence as Lily ran across the grass with her classmates. Not the careful, measured steps of a child afraid of falling, but the abandoned, joyful sprint of a 6-year-old free from constraints. NeuroClear had transformed her life. The tremors had diminished to the point where they were barely noticeable. Her coordination had improved so dramatically that her physical therapist had reduced sessions to once monthly rather than twice weekly. Most importantly, the cognitive decline that was the most terrifying aspect of juvenile Huntington's had stabilized. It wasn't a cure, Dr. Chun had been careful to emphasize that. Juvenile Huntington's would still progress eventually, but NeuroClear had bought Lily precious years of childhood that would otherwise have been lost. She's doing well. Marcus turned to find Victoria standing beside him, watching Lily through the fence. Unlike their first meeting at La Terrace, where power dynamics had separated them, they now stood as equals, colleagues, perhaps even friends. She's thriving, Marcus agreed. Dr. Chun says her latest neurological assessment shows stability across all markers. No disease progression. 3 months. Victoria nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. She'd changed too in these months, still the formidable CEO, but the armor she wore seemed lighter somehow, less rigid. The FDA had fast-tracked NeuroClear based on the compelling data from the reinstated trial. Phase 3 was progressing rapidly, with full approval expected within 18 months. Dr. Winters had returned to lead the research team, his reputation not only restored but enhanced by his ethical stand. Reynolds faced federal charges for securities fraud and was cooperating with authorities, implicating others in exchange for leniency. Grayson had resigned from the board to pursue other interests, his carefully constructed legacy in tatters. As for Marcus, his life had undergone a transformation as profound as Lily's. His role at Hawthorne had evolved from temporary consultant to permanent director of patient advocacy, overseeing a new department dedicated to ensuring patient perspectives informed every stage of drug development. Have you seen today's announcement? Victoria asked, breaking into his thoughts. About the European approval? Marcus had been fielding media calls about it all morning. NeuroClear's provisional approval in the EU meant thousands more children would soon have access to the treatment. Not that one. Victoria handed him her tablet, open to a press release that hadn't yet gone public. The headline read, Hawthorne Innovations launches Langford Initiative for Rare Pediatric Diseases. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Langford? Named after my brother, Victoria explained, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. $1 billion commitment to developing treatments for rare pediatric conditions that have been historically overlooked because they aren't considered profitable enough. Victoria, this is ... single quotes. Marcus struggled to find words adequate to the magnitude of the gesture. It's what Michael would have wanted, she said simply, and it's what these these children deserve. The school bell rang, signaling the end of recess. Lily spotted them through the fence and waved enthusiastically before running back toward the building with her friends. Her movements fluid and confident in a way that still amazed Marcus each time he witnessed it. "How's the new apartment?" Victoria asked as they walked back toward the waiting car. Another life-changing development. Marcus and Lily had moved from their cramped one-bedroom to a spacious two-bedroom closer to both the school and Hawthorne headquarters. His new salary made such luxuries as separate bedrooms and a building with an elevator possible. Lily loves having her own room to decorate. She's covered every inch with her drawings. Marcus smiled at the memory of Lily's delight as she arranged her art supplies in her new desk. "How about you? How's the house hunting going?" After months of working 16-hour days, Victoria had finally acknowledged she needed a life beyond Hawthorne's walls. Her search for a home, a real home, not just a convenient condo near the office, had become a running conversation between them. "I found one I like," she admitted, "an old Victorian with a garden. It needs work, but but it has character," Marcus finished for her. Remembering her descriptions of the childhood home she'd loved before her parents' divorce had uprooted her life. "When do you close?" "Next week. I thought perhaps you and Lily might help me move in. I've been told I need a child's perspective on which room should be the library." The invitation, casual as it sounded, represented something significant. A deliberate blurring of the boundaries between professional and personal that Victoria rarely allowed. "We'd like that," Marcus said simply. As they reached the car, Victoria hesitated, her hand on the door handle. "I've been meaning to ask you something. That night at La Terrace, when you refused to serve me, what would you have done if I'd reacted differently? If I'd demanded your firing or made a scene?" Marcus considered the question. "I'm not sure. I was terrified I'd lose my job, but I couldn't bring myself to serve the person I believed had taken away Lily's chance at improvement. It was a brave stand," Victoria observed. "Foolhardy, perhaps, but brave." Or desperate," Marcus countered. "A father with nothing left to lose." Victoria's expression softened. "And now?" The question contained multitudes. And now that Lily was improving? And now that his career had transformed? And now that they had moved from adversaries to allies to something neither of them had quite defined? "Now," Marcus said thoughtfully, "I'd probably still refuse to serve you, but I'd suggest we have dinner somewhere else instead, as equals." A smile spread across Victoria's face, not the measured, strategic smile she used in board meetings, but something warmer, more genuine. "I'd like that, though I should warn you I'm a terrible cook." "That's all right," Marcus laughed. "I happen to know my way around a kitchen." As they drove away from the school, Marcus glanced back at the playground where his daughter had run freely for the first time in years. 6 days ago, he'd been a struggling waiter watching his child's health deteriorate with no recourse. Now he was helping shape policy at a major pharmaceutical company. His daughter was improving daily, and the formidable CEO beside him was talking about dinner plans and Victorian houses with gardens. All because he'd refused to serve her that night at La Teresa. Small act of desperate courage that had changed everything. "You know," Victoria said, following his gaze toward the school, "when people talk about that night, they focus on your refusal to serve me. But that's not what changed things, no?" Marcus asked. "No. What changed everything was what came after when I asked why. You told me the truth, even though it might have cost you everything." Her eyes met his. "Courage often looks like defiance at first, but the real courage was in what you did next, standing your ground and speaking your truth, even when you thought no one would listen." As the car merged into traffic, carrying them toward the future they'd forged together, Marcus realized the full symmetry of what had happened. He'd refused to serve Victoria Hawthorne, CEO, but in doing so, he'd given her something far more valuable than dinner, a chance to remember why she'd become CEO in the first place. And in return, she hadn't just changed his life, she'd saved his daughter's. Sometimes, the most important service wasn't what you offered, but what you refused and what you demanded instead.